This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The 30th UN Climate Summit is beginning today in the Brazilian rainforest city of Belém, in the mouth of the Amazon River. Last week, many world leaders gathered in advance for a two-day summit. This is Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
A Convenção do Clima regressa ao país onde nasceu.
The Climate Convention returns to the country where it was born. Today, the eyes of the world turn to Belém with immense expectation. For the first time in history, a climate COP will take place in the heart of the Amazon. In the global imagination, there is no greater symbol of the environmental cause than the Amazon rainforest.
Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley said the world needs to do far more to help countries most impacted by the climate crisis, including those hit by Hurricane Melissa.
Because all of us should hold our heads down in shame, because having established this fund a few years ago in Sharm el-Sheikh, its capital base is still under $800 million, while Jamaica reels from damage in excess of $7 billion US, not to mention Cuba, Haiti, or the Bahamas.
Tuvalu's Home Affairs and Environment Minister Nina Lakhani criticized the Trump administration for not sending a high-level delegation to the climate summit.
Tragically, the world's largest historical emitter of greenhouse gas emission has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. I was at the UN General Assembly when President Trump spent a considerable amount of his address to world leaders disparaging renewable energy sources and challenging the scientific consensus on climate change. Mr. President, this is a shameful disregard for the rest of the world. We only need to reflect on the recent impact of Hurricane Melissa that wreaked havoc on Jamaica and Cuba, and Typhoon Tino that hit the Philippines, to understand that climate change is here.
The Trump administration's defended its decision to skip the climate summit. A White House spokesperson said, quote, President Trump will not jeopardize our country's economic and national security to pursue vague climate goals that are killing other countries, unquote. In one of his first acts in office, Trump began the process of withdrawing the U.S. from the landmark Paris Climate Agreement. We begin today's show in Belém with Yeb Sanyo, the former chief climate negotiator for the Philippines. Over the weekend, a major typhoon hit the Philippines, killing at least 8 people and displacing more than 1.4 million others. Typhoon Fanghuang hit as the Philippines was still recovering from another typhoon, which killed at least 224 people just last week. The Philippines has been hit by 21 major storms this year. For Yeb Sanyo, this marks at least the 3rd time he's seen the Philippines hit by a deadly storm during the UN Climate Summit. This is Sanyo speaking in 2012. After a typhoon hit the Philippines, the storm killed almost 2,000 people.
I appeal to ministers. The outcome of our work is not about what our political masters want. It is about what is demanded of us by 7 billion people. I appeal to all, please, no more delays, no more excuses. Please let Doha be remembered as the place where we found the political will to turn things around. And let 2012 be remembered as the year the world found the courage to do so, to find the courage to take responsibility for the future we want. I ask of all of us here, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? If not here, then where? Thank you, Madam Chair.
In 2013, another typhoon hit the Philippines as Yeb Sanyo attended at the UN Climate Summit in Warsaw.
What my country is going through as a result of this extreme climate event is madness. The climate crisis is madness. Mr. President, we can stop this madness right here in Warsaw.
At that summit, Yeb Sanyo engaged in a hunger strike, again, a Filipino negotiator. Yeb Sanyo joins us now from Belém, Brazil. He's now the chair of the Laudato Si movement, which was formerly known as the Global Catholic Climate Movement. We welcome you back to Democracy Now!, Yeb. If you can talk about what has happened so far and why you're there, why you're in the gateway of the Amazon at this 30th summit, what the significance of this summit is, and the significance of one of the leading one of the leading carbon gas emitters, the United States, not attending.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be on the show again. But always under difficult circumstances, as you have described. It is, of course, sobering to be here with the backdrop of another catastrophic event back home, a back-to-back typhoons striking the Philippines, which, as you have just mentioned, has happened a couple of times before, and one is just too many. Now, it is important for us to be here as a part of civil society. I think we cannot afford not to engage in a process which endeavors to find lasting solutions to avert a deepening crisis, a crisis that is being felt by many people and communities around the world, a crisis that is real, that is profoundly unfair and that disproportionately impacts the most vulnerable and who had the least contribution in creating this problem. And what is starkly unfair, of course, is not just the absence of the biggest historical emitter in the room, but also the disregard, as we have heard from the Minister of Tuvalu, the shameful disregard of the lives of people around the world, and I would say the unethical dismissal of the voices of people around the world who are clamoring for world leaders to actually do something about this crisis. And that we find ourselves in the country where the Climate Convention was born 30 years ago, at the gateway of the Amazon. I agree that this is not just a symbolic part of the context of why COP30 is being held here, but I think the strength of the voices from indigenous communities, from local communities that are impacted by the climate crisis, as well as for me the context of the strength of faith communities. I consider this, Amy, being now chair of the Laudato Si movement, as a critical juncture in our work to bring in all of the faith communities, considering that countries are dismally putting forward their nationally determined contributions that should spell out the ambition that is needed to confront the climate crisis. So this is a very important gathering, of course, like before, but for us this is a reckoning. It is a moral reckoning. COP30 it is.
What has changed since that 2013 speech we played a clip of when you were chief climate negotiator for the Philippines at the Warsaw Summit? You went on a hunger strike then. This was 12 years ago.
Well, a lot has changed, and more particularly, the impacts that are being felt in many places around the world, especially people who are already struggling to make ends meet. A lot of radical things have changed in terms of their circumstances, in terms of our circumstances, where typhoons have become more intense, and the scientific basis for saying that typhoons is driven by a warmer world has become a lot more clearer now. And There's of course a lot of things that have changed in terms of the global political leadership, if you can put it that way, if you can consider that as part of the worrying change in how many political leaders have abandoned their duty to have a higher ambition on climate. Now, when we ask what else has changed around the regime on climate change, I can say that there are, of course, little steps that have been taken in the UNFCCC, in the Climate Convention. But if you ask me honestly, I think these are little steps and steps that are too little and probably too late, as we can see that the Paris Agreement implementation has become very difficult and has hit a lot of roadblocks along the way. The can is being kicked down the road every year. There's so much watering down of commitments. And you know, there's just a lot of room to be improved in terms of how countries are working together to affect what President Lula has said is the imperative to strengthen multilateralism.
Watering down is an interesting term to use in this case. In addition to Yeb Sanyo speaking to us from the 30th UN Climate Summit in Belém, Brazil, we're joined here in New York by the UN Climate, by Nina Lakhani, a senior climate justice reporter for The Guardian U.S. Her latest piece out today, Climate Disasters Displaced 250 million people in the past 10 years, UN reports finds. She's also been reporting on the role of fossil fuel lobbyists at the Climate Summit. Nina Lakhani, thanks so much for being back with us. We have spoken to you at climate summits in the past, but you have this explosive piece, how thousands of fossil fuel lobbyists got access to UN climate talks, then kept drilling. You say more than 5,000 fossil fuel lobbyists were given access to UN climate summits over the past 4 years, a period marked by a rise in catastrophic extreme weather, inadequate climate action, and record oil and gas expansion. Explain exactly what you found.
So this is research that's conducted by the Big Polluters Act Coalition, which is a coalition of hundreds of organisations around the world. And what they found is in the last 4 years, more than 5,350 lobbyists representing fossil fuel companies, trade associations and other organisations representing oil, gas and coal have been given access to the climate talks. This far outnumbers the negotiators and the delegations that are present from most countries, right? And it also excludes all of the lobbyists sent to represent other big polluting industries or industries that benefit from fossil fuel extraction, like big agriculture, like mining, big tech, finance, and also excludes the fossil fuel lobbyists or the executives who are on official delegations. So why does this matter? So these companies have long said, and the UNFCCC has agreed that they need a seat at the table, that they're part of the solution, they're there with technology, they want to make a transition. This research shows that is just absolutely not true. Just 90 of the oil, gas and coal companies that sent lobbyists in the last 4 years are responsible for almost 60% of the oil and gas that was drilled last year, and responsible for almost 2/3 of the short-term oil and gas expansion projects that are about to start extracting and exploration. And on that second figure, that, if they all go ahead, they will drill the equivalent of enough oil to coat the landmass of 7 European countries entirely, including France, Germany, and Denmark. So, these companies are sending lobbyists in order to block climate action. This is climate obstruction at work. They're there to delay meaningful climate action, which every country in the world is obliged to do under international law, and they're there to promote false solutions like carbon markets, carbon capture and storage, these market-based solutions which are not going to save the planet. we know from all the science out there, and we now know that under international law, every single country in the world, whether they're a member of the Paris Agreement or not, are obliged under law to stop fossil fuel extraction, to stop licenses, to stop subsidies, and every country has a legal obligation to regulate these private companies that are operating within their borders. And a failure to do so is a breach of international law.
And you say the true reach of fossil fuel tentacles is undoubtedly deeper, as the lobbyist data excludes executives and other company representatives on official country delegations. You particularly single out United Arab Emirates, Russia, and Azerbaijan. Explain.
Yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of countries will include in their official delegations executives from some of the biggest corporations. So they are there in these secret country-to-country, state-to-state level negotiations, making climate policy. You know, we have this is the 30th year of these climate talks, and countries have absolutely failed to take the climate action necessary that science tells us that we need to take, and that Indigenous people and frontline communities have been telling us that we need to take for decades now, right? We need to stop fossil fuel extraction. We need to phase out fossil fuels. We need to cut subsidies. We need to cut consumption. And these executives having a seat at the table when actually climate vulnerable countries cannot actually attend in big numbers because of the huge costs and other barriers involved is completely outrageous. And they do it because it enables them to keep drilling. It enables them to block climate action that we need to take in order to come off fossil fuels.
And two of those countries, in the case of UAE and Azerbaijan, they hosted the COP summits.
Yeah, absolutely. In Azerbaijan last year, there was more than 1,700 fossil fuel lobbyists present. That was more, like many more than 10 of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world had in their delegations, right? I mean, every year it's getting worse rather than better. And honestly, the response from the UN is absolutely, like, it's bonkers, you know. I mean, they said to me, we can't change, we can't solve this problem overnight, just like we can't solve the climate crisis overnight. Well, actually, they could. They could just ban fossil fuel lobbyists and all other lobbyists from polluting industries attending the UN climate summits. That's not a hard thing to do. You know, we have more information about who's going. There's more, but that's not enough. Like, they just need to get these polluters out of the negotiations so that climate action can actually be taken.
You've also written a really important piece, Existential and Urgent: What Impact Will ICJ, the International Court of Justice, climate ruling have on COP30? This also goes to the issue of loss and damage, which will bring us back to Yeb Sanyo, because the Philippines is the host of of who's in charge of loss and damage. Explain it all.
Yeah, so the Loss and Damage Fund, which is a fund that some of the island nations and other vulnerable countries have been campaigning for decades now, but the wealthy polluting countries have blocked, was finally 2 years ago created. And this is a fund that is being managed out of the Philippines, which is an extremely climate vulnerable country, as we've heard already. And the agreement was that, you know, the wealthy polluting nations would contribute to this fund to help pay for the irreversible loss and damage that countries are already experiencing. 2 years on, only $750 million has been actually agreed or has been pledged to that fund. We need hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. I mean, look at Melissa, you know, in the Caribbean. I mean, huge swathes of mountains in Jamaica have had all of the trees swept, you know, like just knocked down by the heavy winds. I mean, it's billions of dollars of damage just in Jamaica.
We had a British Jamaican activist on after Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica. And she said they shouldn't be named after women and men like Hurricane Melissa, which sounds so innocent. these hurricanes should be named for oil companies.
Yeah, Hurricane Exxon, Hurricane Chevron, Hurricane Petrobras. Absolutely, you know, it's. I mean, these are, you know, these storms, and you know, we've seen the one in Philippines over the weekend, Melissa, but so many more. They are absolutely being turbocharged by the increasing temperatures in the atmosphere and the ocean. There is no doubt about that, right? And coming back to the ICJ ruling, so the ICJ in July. Issued a landmark advisory opinion which made it abundantly clear that every single state in the world is legally bound to take climate action, with due diligence, to do everything in their powers to mitigate, to remedy, and to prevent the climate crisis, which they said presents an urgent and existential threat to the planet and therefore humanity. This is a universal obligation. So the US leaving the Paris Agreement, I'm sorry, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make the US not bound under international law, to take meaningful climate action, and it went really far. It was the furthest any sort of court has ever gone on fossil fuels. It said that every single, the states have a legal obligation under international law to stop fossil fuel extraction, consumption, licenses and subsidies. And that duty, that legal duty, extends to the regulation of corporations that are operating within their borders. A failure to do so amounts to an international wrongful act that could be subject to legal consequences. And so why does this matter, right? So every time you hear of a fossil fuel expansion plan, we had one just recently in Brazil by Petrobras, which is a majority state-owned oil company. They're going to start exploring off the in the ocean in Brazil, right? That is a violation of international international law, right? The law is very clear that fossil fuel expansion has to stop, right? And so and it's up to Brazil as a state to regulate the companies operating in their boundaries. Now, what Petrobras said to me is that we go to COP. Petrobras have sent dozens of lobbyists, by the way, to COP in the last few years. We want to be there. We want to be following energy policy. We want to be part of the solution. And how is this a solution? You know, starting drilling close to the mouth of the Amazon, which is home to 10% of the world's biodiversity.
As we begin to wrap up, Yeb Sanyo in Belen, where the UN COP is happening, COP 30. Global emissions have nearly doubled in the last 33 years. Your country, the Philippines, is the home of the Loss and Damage Fund, which has hardly been funded. You're the former chief climate negotiator for the Philippines. Now you're a leading climate activist. What gives you hope, and what does it mean to say that this summit is an action summit?
Well, I like that you refer to the word hope. I take that as something that I wake up every morning with, which is not a choice, but to carry hope, because and that's what I wish I could bring into the conversation here, including many faith communities that have come here to Belém. COPs, and now we're in the 30th edition of this. I see a lot of young people here, and world leaders have been negotiating on climate change longer than these young people have been alive. That's very striking. That's very telling in how this process has been for 3 decades. I have no illusion, Amy. I have no illusion that the 30th edition of the COP could deliver something groundbreaking and something that would change the landscape of climate action just because we are in Brazil, just because we are in Belém, at the gateway of the Amazon. But this is a place where, I can say, you earlier asked what has changed over the course of the past decade. I can say that the movement has evolved and has become much stronger, and this is where the international climate movement converges every year. And this is where we could show the power of people, show the power of communities, of indigenous communities, of young people, of women, of faith communities who are doing a lot on the ground at the grassroots in many parts of the world. So I have firm belief that hope is possible, and that we can drive ambition and push political leaders by mobilizing the necessary political pressure that can overcome, as we have just been hearing, the fossil fuel lobby, the influence, the conflict of interest, and the vested interests that are almost always at play in these negotiations.
Yebsanyo, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Former chief climate negotiator for the Philippines, now chair of the Laudato Si movement, formerly known as the Global Catholic Climate Movement, also executive director of CICAT, a grassroots environmental community development organization in the Philippines. Finally, we just have 30 seconds, Nina Lakhani. Your latest piece talks about the hundreds of millions of refugees, climate refugees around the world as Europe and the United States shuts down their borders, the countries most responsible for climate change, stopping refugees from fleeing the effects of climate change, the intense typhoons and hurricanes and more.
Yeah, the UN Refugee Agency's new report shows that there's been an average of 70,000 displacements every single day due to climate disasters over the last 10 years. And many of the countries that are hosting climate displaced people are also countries who are facing conflict, right? So just to bring this back to the COP30, you know, 25 UN special rapporteurs are releasing a statement this morning that will basically say that a failure to take really strong action towards the end of fossil fuels and banning fossil fuel lobbyists will absolutely be the end of the credibility of this process that has really failed for the last 30 years to do what it needs to do to prevent climate disasters that are causing, huge amounts of displacement around the world now.
Nina Lakhani, senior climate justice reporter for The Guardian U.S. We'll link to your recent articles at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Will be reporting from the UN Climate Summit in Belém, Brazil, throughout next week. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.